Hi, it's good to be with you. I'm going to share with you today my testimony. And at the same time, I'm going to share with you my own subjectivity when it comes to my PhD. Subjectivity is a complicated area. We all have a subjectivity. Every department, every organization, all has a subjectivity, and every culture. There is one culture, particularly the Western culture, that goes into the world claiming it is the universal objectivity, but that can make it imperialistic and controlling. Subjectivity, I believe, people's life stories, I believe, is important. And those that research society sometimes will argue this. Is it all about structures, systematically analyzed philosophical structures, and those structures are the most important thing that we have? Or is it that people are important, that each and every one of us are a universe in and of ourselves, and we have our own experiences, emotions, and agency? Agency is where you choose to resist and to go your own way, or you choose to choose something, to choose a tradition. And I believe agency is so important in our postmodern age that we should encourage people to choose things. We can teach, we can reason with them, but we can't go back to the days, or some would argue you can't, and I would argue that way, but of imposing on people structures. In terms of the gospel, to impose Christianity or the gospel into a religion that is imposed on into an individual has complications and problems. One is it causes people to be defined. It enslaves people. It tells people what they should think, what they should do. And that can cause anxieties and fears. And I'm going to explain why that is. And in fact, I think that form is causing the world a whole lot of wars and things like that, because we argue about what structures shouldn't be imposed. Instead, I'm going to say that it's about individuals choosing their path, individuals choosing to follow the gospel, to receive the gospel, to find life and peace with God. And as they do that, they meet with other people who are sharing that path, or not sharing that path, but they can share that path with them. And it's a path, it's a process that they share. So rather than coming with structures and imposing, bang, onto people and hurting them, traumatizing them, rather you say, look, this is what I believe is the gospel. This is what I believe is what God's guiding. It could be that we're wrong. It could be that we have the wrong understanding. And as I have gone through so much theological education, I realized that I went in one direction. And as I've got involved, like with the Jewish thinking of the Bible, I realized that perhaps some of that theological structures, although some good things are there and some things that we should use and discuss and dialogue with, I think there are some other processes that may be even more useful. So life stories, are they important to you? Just thinking it, I think there are many people, I've been in many meetings, and very often I've gone along with the statistics, and I've worked in missionary statistics, and I come with all these statistics, and for many people it doesn't connect. Numbers, what they connect with is people's stories and how the Gospels touch them. So it's important. I think it's a very important area of life in general. We like films that have stories, and we like to absorb that, and we like stories as themselves, not just life stories, but stories. Every film has a kind of a plot and a story there, and it's very attractive. Is it important for your worldview? Is it that the structure is the only thing that is for you? Or is it that your experiences, your emotions and your agency as you've gone through life shapes your worldview? And your worldview may actually be on a bit of a journey. It's not a thing, but it's something of a thing that is in process. And as you think about your life story, and I've asked the people that I've researched, how do you how do you have this life story? How did it come about? And how do you relate with others? I can ask the same. Is your family important to you? Is the community that you're part of, is it important to you? Is society important to you? The world, the place, the nation that you live in, the region that you're in, is it important to you? Do you vote? Do you participate? Do you debate? Are these things important to you? And if the answer is yes, then you can't close the debate down and just say, well, this is the prominent and the normative, and you have to just shut up. No, you have to deal with people and respect people. And I believe that's part of the gospel, to respect people, engage people, no matter where they are and what they're from, on a journey. In academia, we could contest that life stories shouldn't be here. And in fact, I was listening to a German guy at the History of Experiences at Tampere conference, and the German guy was recalling a time when a professor said to him, "Why do research agency? That's something for people with nothing to say, writing about people who have nothing to say." And that's the trouble of structures. You become nothing. And when we go into academia, we like to construct these things that explain the whole world. And then we had this sociologist idea, and I've got it here in my notes, which I can't give the quote because I haven't found it, but I remember reading it because it caused an emotional reaction. So a sociologist stated that if you're part of a community that you research, you cease to be a sociologist. And that puts sociology as a mutually exclusive thing to religion or spirituality. So you're meant to be something over here, a philosopher that's distant and objective. And there is a place for that type of distance and objectivity. But it's also a place to say, well, you can't access the people you research without having the privilege to be part of the people you research. And that, I would argue, is very important. It's been part of feminism, part of LGBT communities, and how to research them, that it's through people that are part of that. And that's certainly the case, taking those as illustrations and examples. When you research sensitive identities, unless you're part of that community that's sensitive, they won't trust you. And I've had this privilege to be part of the Muslim background believers in Bangladesh and part of the Messianic Jews globally. And that's because I'm part of them in many ways, and I'll explain that. And you have this issue that academia could be considered a religion, because you've got belief, behavior, and belonging, which is a sociologist way to understand religion, or becoming, or something like that. And you could argue that anything can take on a religious form. In fact, you can love and serve something as an idol, as something that competes to God. And if you read the Bible, that's exactly what the Bible's about. That if you love and serve something else, that is your religion. Your family could be your religion. Your work could be your religion. Anything could be your religion. But in academia, we have this peculiar way, in Western academia, in this Western form, we have this peculiar way of saying that's religion, that's secular, and something like that. It's a suspicious agenda. And that's also part of my research. All objectivity, in a way, is a subjectivity. White normality, male white normality, the prominent, the normative discourses that we have in the West, in global terms, is a subjectivity. And I think as we go into the world, we need to realize that it's not something peculiar when somebody else engages the gospel, that they're peculiar, particularly a Muslim background believer, that's peculiar. They still have their background. We all have our background. In fact, most European Christians are European pagan background believers and still have a lot of paganism, Neoplatonism, pagan calendar, etc. They still have a lot of that in the formation of Christianity. So it's a negotiation. And I would argue Muslim background believer is a derogative term. I would argue also Messianic Jews can be argued to be derogative. It's about, primarily, as I research the data, people meeting with Jesus Christ, Isa el-Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, And when they meet with him as the Messiah, it's not just something up here in the head, which is very Western, but something here in the heart, which is spiritual, a bit of a journey, something that they're on a process with. And that makes it a negotiation. It makes it that life is always like that. And we have got to realize that we don't have all the answers. We're not the ones that can evaluate, oh, we are the true ones and you're the inferior ones. That's arrogant. There's a lot of hubris there. And maybe God will humble us if we went down that way. You have to realize the West also has lots of problems. But they like to hide it. We're the best. We're perfect. Nobody criticizes us. And I've come across that a lot in Finland. And in Finland, we're in one of the happiest, best places in the world, lots of good statistics. But you'll still find a lot of loneliness, obesity, alcoholism, suicides. There are problems. There are social problems here. This place is not perfect. None of us are perfect. And once we realize that none of us are perfect, then we don't have that superior objectivity. We have some ideas, we have something to contribute, but we don't have it all. We have something to learn as well. And it's important to learn and contribute for well-being, that your giving and taking is so important, that you're learning and developing your learning, good for well-being. And giving is so important for your well-being. So if you're just put in a box and told what you should do, I think that's destroying a lot of people's faith, and wrongly so. So I see one of the problems is that we have shaped the gospel into a religion, happened in the 1st, 2nd centuries, really took form in the 5th century, going on into the Middle Ages. And when it's in that form, it starts to impose more and more, becomes bigger and bigger and controlling. It's a big, big religious business, and it imposes on people, sometimes bloodthirstily, murderous, bullying, oppression, and marginalization. And I've got stories from the context that I'm in right now, but we know this. We know it in school that we get this, well, the teachers didn't kill us, but anyway, teachers, leave those kids alone, boom, boom, Pink Floyd. But we get this idea of structuralism, and then you have John Lennon, imagine no religion, we can be free of religion. Well, we get this behavioristic structuralism coming, and it comes to us in schools, in management, and I believe through religion, and it corrupts what I think God has really installed. And we've been thinking about this in the more postmodern era, and I think it's part of the gospel that we should reevaluate behavioral structuralism. You can't escape it. All parents, they use rewards and punishments to try and encourage and nurture certain behavior. But at the same time, we should be not just the ones managing other people's behavior as a parent, but we should be encouraging them to take decisions. And that moves away from behavioral structuralism into something else. And behavioral structuralism in schools, in management, and in parenting, and in religion, I believe causes a lot of well-being deprivation. When we move away from that, and the thing when you're under this yoke of behavioral structuralism, and then there's this breaking free of that, we go into humanistic relativism. That's your truth. That's my truth. We're all here together. It doesn't matter. What happens with that? That becomes chaos. And then the response to that chaos is to go into tribes. We all go into our own group. And that's a breakdown of democracy, a breakdown. We lose the core of how to talk to each other or debate with each other. And that can lead to some unhealthy things. And therefore, I think we need to look at something. And I'm looking at actually not spirituality as a humanism, but spiritual collectivism, that we have a journey ourselves that we share with others, and we draw upon historical resources and we put that together on a journey. That, I think, is so important. So we all like our agency. We all like the freedom to choose, freedom to resist, reject, revolutionize. We want to be creative sometimes. We want to learn, explore, combine things together. We want freedom to form new collectives. We want new groups. If something's keeping us back and we don't feel we're learning anymore, then we move on to another group, and then we go on another journey. And we could describe that as an identity, but if I would say, if we describe it as a noun identity, we might start to install some bordered structures that divide humanity. I'm thinking really identity could be changed more from a noun to an adjective, a place where you are, or a journey that you're on, and the verbs that you do, the things that you do. And it's a different change of mindset. It's a linguistic issue, actually. I think in our age of secularism, we have secular trans, people are putting things together. Actually, as I analysed this, I looked at these two people, Messianic Jews and Muslim background believers, and I thought, are they a trans identity like transsexualism, bringing together two opposites? And I actually realised maybe the church as a whole is a trans. It should be the Lord's Jewish bride, and we've engrafted into that experience of intimacy and closeness with God. And yet it's become a little bit Greek male, dominating, imposing phallic symbols of power and dominance. So there's a trans there. So I went in that direction, and I come out of it, and I think actually I'm trying to describe what is more genuine engagement with cultures globally that is not necessarily a trans, but a free journey. How do you access that sort of data? You need to do an ethnography, which is to go alongside, participate in the life, experience what they're going through, talk with them, interview them, get a little bit of the juicy details, and then analyze that. And that's what I've done with these two groups, Messianic Jews and Muslim background believers. I'm looking at social constructivism, and I had a question mark here, but I think I could describe it now as spiritual collectivism, that in the gospel, in Christ, that we go on a journey together, and it may be multiple different groups exploring different things, doing different things, because people are either philosophical, mystical, or ritual. They all have your own little things, and finding a balance with that, with family and society and the world. So my own subjectivity, to go quickly, I am a Messianic Jew. I'm a Messianic Jew as something that I discovered. I don't look at that as necessarily an identity, which is like, I'm a Messianic Jew and therefore I'm better than you, or as a religion. I don't see it that way. It's really a description, a true description of the journey that I'm presently on. And it's something I've discovered myself to be. And to deny it, I found is harmful. And I have tried to deny it. And therefore, even in myself, I've got background from Vikings, background from Ashkenazi Jews, put it together, and I realized that I'm a bit of a mix, and it's a bit of a journey. Coming Jew and Gentile together, what does it mean? So this is a personal issue, and it's a personal subjectivity, and that affects how I look and what I think is important in the research. But I'm not alone. This is affecting millions of people today. So to give you my academic credentials, I have a master's in statistics from Southampton University, and that's what I came with, but I pretty much gave it up to serve the Lord. I'll explain what I did with that as well. And then I have a master's in interfaith ecumenics or theology from the University of Helsinki. I've become a trained teacher, and I would consider myself a missionary for Jesus Christ, not for Christianity. And the main vehicle of my means to do that is the Bible, engaging it through Greek, through Hebrew. I love the Old Testament, and I've taught the Old Testament, and that's kind of my home. And looking at hermeneutics, it's really, I introduced some ideas, I hear your journey, and that I love to hear. What do you think? And I question and process. So I look at myself more as a trainer rather than a teacher. I'm trying to coach and guide to certain things, and if I see some dangers, I will do that. So you've got a picture here of me going off. This is the Bangladesh picture when I was looking young and fresh with my young family at that time. So give you the background, my name Richard Croft. Croft is actually Viking from Craft, which means empowered or skilled or something like that. Nice name, aha. But yeah, humbling name. And you can see here as a family picture when I was younger, I went to a wedding. Actually, I cut my chin at this wedding, and we were able to get some money from that and have a family holiday in a caravan that came from the cutting of this this chin. So you can see we're blonde, looking very Scandinavian, and my dad actually is very ginger-haired, and I will later on, after blonde, go to ginger, and then I'll go dark like that, like I have done. My mum is Susan Hankins, and that is an anglicised version of Henkin or Hankin, and that relates me, well, to two brothers that came and got assimilated into the UK, into Church of England, etc. But that relates me to Ashkenazi Jews, particularly, this is a famous one, Yehoshua Hankin, who's the Redeemer of Israel, went round and purchased the land for the modern state of Israel. So I sometimes have a foot in the door to the Jewish world because I have that relationship. So Jeremiah Hankin, or Henkin, who becomes Hankins, he came to the UK. He's poor, a horse handler. I think Phil on the Roof really ministers to me. It's a deep story. He married a local lady. He had some boys, and I descend from one of those boys. His daughter stayed Jewish, married amongst the Jewish community, showing that when you assimilate, when you marry into a certain community, it's not straightforward. It's complicated, and people do different things. And I think the boy that I descend from, he married a Newman, his boy married a Freeman, and his boy is my grandfather. And I think they were assimilated Jews because the Jewishness seems to be there. Jewish thinking, Jewish sensitivities are there. Jewish religion? No, that's not there. So rabbinical Judaism? No. But the sense and feeling to some Jewish sensitivities, I believe, remained. So he came to a village separated from the people. He could have gone to some, like London or something, but he didn't. And I think as a horse handler, somebody from the fields, he ended up in the English countryside and married. So here's my grandfather. He was Marcus or Mick Hankins, and went off and fought in the Second World War. And this event of coming across Bergen-Belsen traumatized him and set in motion a loss of the love of, or belief in the love of God. That was something that he battled through his life, but a real suspicion of Christianity, the abuse of Christianity to people, to the working class man. And so he went off into communism, and I was brought up not in strict communism, but certainly with a voice to that there needs to be social justice in the world. We need a revolution. We need to break free from the power of structures over us. And I think there's something in this man's thinking, Karl Marx, who is a Jew. His father converts or assimilates into the Prussian Lutheran Church, and Karl Marx is brought up in that Prussian Lutheran environment as a Jew, and I think the traumas from that is easy to understand why a world without religion would be in his thoughts. I came to the Lord, well, the process started in when I was about 9 years old. At the primary school, I said, oh yeah, we don't believe in any of that. Deep down, I believed in God, but somehow I started to push and go, no, atheism, we don't need this. And I had this conversation with Stephen Morgan, I think that's his name, I could remember wrongly, and he's from the Caribbean, or his mum was from the Caribbean, and he just had a simple way of explaining maybe what he heard in Sunday school, and it spoke to me, and it really ministered. And I just thought, well, Mum, Dad, I want for Christmas a Bible, and that's what they gave me, this Bible here. Jesus is a bit blonde and blue-eyed in there, but it's a very good Bible. It summarizes the stories, and you can learn so much. Certainly the case was when I was a teenager, as my parents were divorcing, I thought about committing suicide. And I asked the God of the Bible why I shouldn't. And I found a spiritual experience where I was being disciplined, told that that's a selfish thing to do. Didn't know what to do with that. Thought in Buddhist terms, maybe that's my inner self or something like that. Very complicated because I got into lots of things. In in my university years, having lived with a girl for a couple of years, and then we were separated, and then things didn't go well, came back together. It didn't have the backbone, didn't have the structure that it needed. Anyway, in the breaking up of that, not marriage, but relationship, it ended up being very traumatic and hurtful. And so I ended up taking drugs and alcohol, just giving up in a mess. And I called to God to help me. And as I woke up from the drugs and cried, my circumstances changed. And I was with a lot of Christians, which is not surprising as it was Christian hostel. And I got invited to South Street Baptist Church in Greenwich. And they were going through a charismatic renewal, and it was the charismatic experience, the visceral experience, where I felt the presence of the Lord. I felt that this was, if you tried philosophical argument, I would have ripped you apart. If you tried to impose on me or try and make me a number on some evangelism thing, I would have probably punched you in the face. But I experienced the presence of the Lord, and my friend said, don't accept the communion unless you receive Jesus into your life. And his comment just caused me to cry. I am a grown man. You don't cry. Englishmen don't cry. We are stoic. We resist such things. But I did. I became very emotional. And I started to cry. And I realized, wow, that Jesus was real. And this was the question of my life. And I asked him to come into my life. And I had this immense joy and peace. I can't tell you how much. I was one of those annoying Christians for weeks after this. Couldn't stop talking about how wonderful this experience was to receive Jesus into my life. Things didn't go wonderfully. And I started to get into questions of the Trinity, etc., etc., etc. I had this anti-Christian background. It started to play. I moved up north and I went to another Baptist church, which was very dry and intellectual, Protestant intellectualism. And I really went, nah, I didn't like this. And I left. I went in the world, drinking, inappropriate relationships. Nothing was satisfying. Nothing was settling. I had no structure. I had no form. I just was feeling empty and in a lot of pain. And then I started to think, well, who has God and who has Jesus? Because these things I know. And I got involved in Islam. It's a big story, but God gave me a dream, a vision to come out of that. And I basically not only received Jesus into my life before, I gave my life to Jesus. And that's been an interesting thing to do. I ended up at WEC, which is a faith mission, classic faith mission. And I worked with the Operation World, and I saw the whole evangelical world particularly and what's going on. I lived by faith, which was volunteering, and money came. It was a very poor way of living, a very interesting way of living, but I facilitated some activities. I went on, I did the training college and I left it because I'm a biblicist. It wasn't Bible-based enough for me. I would, in reflection, say it was Reformed Christianity in a low key with clear Western ways of thinking about different things. Anyway, it wasn't truly Bible. I would have just been happy to just study the Bible all the way through several years, and that would have prepared me. But they wanted to do all kinds of philosophy and psychology, and no, it's all good things, but it wasn't for me at that time. I left, and I went to OM, and I was part of evangelism to Muslims and Turning Point, and part of that environment and that time I met my wife to be, and which of course it's Operation Marriage. And then I also was involved with Anglicans through Faith Missions. Alpha have played significant roles in my life. When I came to Finland with that type of background, as I got involved with the Anglicans and the charismatic Anglicans and the community-based Anglicans, yes, I love them tremendously. There's all the other church stuff. Somehow that sort of fades away, and you have these special communities and Bible-focused spirituality. Love it. And I came to Finland and I thought, well, I'll join a revival Lutheran mission. That's going to be the same. Well, Lutheranism is a little bit of a separate thing. And even by their own confession, they will distinguish whether you're Lutheran or not, or whether you're Finnish Lutheran or not. And I found that a little tiring, traumatizing. I don't agree with the communion, way they see the communion. So it just becomes oppressive. Anyway, don't want to get too negative, but I had the opportunity to serve with them in Bangladesh, partly with tribal people, which is here, my daughter, in the tribal areas up in the north of Bangladesh. But I mainly work with Muslim background believers in Dhaka as a theological consultant, and I loved that, and I would love to go back, but we nearly died. I had dengue 3 times, my daughter twice, and my wife nearly died, so we had to leave. So church-wise, International Evangelical Church, I was part of that. I was the head of mission and evangelism. I was leading a home group, which was massive. It was a church in itself. I think we had 15, 20 people, including the kids, maybe 20. Lovely group. Something wonderful was going on there. Very happy to have been part of that group. Then when I came back from Bangladesh, I just thought, I can't cope with this Lutheranism anymore. It's so oppressive. It's so imposing, so structured. This is the prominent normative. You're in Finland. You should do this. Oh, my goodness. They don't realize how much they pressure people, burden people, and I became very, very, very tired with that. So I went on to the United Community Church. I know it was founded as a Pentecostal church, so I thought I'm into something of a more spiritual life, but it actually been replanted as a American Baptist church, so it was a conservative liberal divide, and there was one sermon on cessationism, and I thought that's enough for that. So I went on to New Wine, which is an Anglican form in Finland, which is Verkosto. Had a really good time, but linguistically, Finnish is extremely tiring if you don't know it. So you sit there hearing this babbling, and it was all right. There was some good times there. But I then moved on to Helsinki Vineyard, where I led a home group, a men's counseling group, and there were some good things there, but I'm not really a trendy sort of guy. I didn't feel like, hey man, you got to chill out or something. I'm a bit of an intellectual academic. I do operate a lot in my head, and I did a lot of counseling with them, and I shared and I ministered. So good evangelical psychological stuff. I could be in Vineyard, but I think to me I would like it. Yeah, well, there's something I could say there. While I was away in Jerusalem for 2 months, my family went to Free Church, and I came back and I thought I'd join. It was Finnish English, but I didn't really feel like I belonged there. Home churches I've been involved with. I love small fellowships, and through one small English service, I got involved with Salem, the Pentecostal church. And I think there's a lot of things that tick the right boxes for me, but I've had a lot of experience of different churches, not only in Finland, but also around the world. Now, what about my Jewish, because as I connect with my Jewish roots, I've been involved with Shorashim, with Chaim Bo'or, David's house, which is One New Man. I use a lot of resources on the internet. I've been involved with towards the Second Jerusalem Council, another Roman Catholic Jewish thing, Yachad Yeshua, which is kind of looking at it more in a religious way, but it's okay, it's good. Some nice stories and some background, some theological reflections. I would locate my Jewish thinking more in Rav Kook's Spiritual Revolution, really about finding yourself with God through Torah reflection, but I would add on that, of course, the Messiah, but there's a messianic aspect here. I like Botiek's thinking and Avraham Infield. Limud I've been participating in, and I would say I firmly have my heart in the Jewish community. Rabbinical Judaism, okay, I can learn a lot, and I spend a lot of time with Chabad, learning from there and through Messianic Jewish websites. I'm here, but I don't know how I'm here. And that's a very common story amongst Messianic Jews. What are we? What is this process that we feel led to? God leads us to. It's interesting as I reflect on this. There's a book where very clearly they show that the Talmud is written in part by Christians, but all three of these religions, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, have been Hellenized. The noun-based religious identities and how they've shaped each other. And my heart is to go back to the first century. What was it like before it was religion? Because there wasn't religion then. There were religious type aspects, but there was this diversity and this spirituality. And I think there's something healing there, something free in there that I'm very interested to explore based on the Messiah concept. And Yeshua, or Jesus, Issa, being that. And it's certainly the key factor to the Messianic Jews of what they are. It's meeting with this character spiritually. And also for the Muslim background believers, they meet with him. It's all, quote, it's all about Christ. It's all about him. The religious structures, the cultural structures, the linguistic structures, that's another journey. That's another thing. We have to be a little bit humble, less intellectualized, less imposing. Sometimes you have to be intellectualized to try and process it all, but it's more of a journey. For me, I've met some really special people that have opened up their life to receive God's presence, the Shekinah, into their life. And when I see it, there are some other people which are religious and what have you, relying on religious structures. But when I see those individuals that are walking with the Lord, that know the Lord, I am so encouraged in my faith. I'm so refreshed. This is the last picture. This is also another image. I think Messianic Jews have a place in ecumenical dialogues. And I think it may be a way to help Western Christians come out of their nationalistic, especially some of the Protestants, come out of their nationalistic strongholds and cultural strongholds. Because once you reform, you think you've got a better faith, and it affects so many Western denominations that we've got better and better and better, that you have no room. And I think this is my reflection. Let's just meet the Lord. Receive the Spirit of God. Bo Ruach Elohim. Receive him. Enable him. Allow him to have lordship over your life and to enter into a journey with him. It will meet your home. It will meet your home. It won't destroy your home. It will meet your home, and it will transform. It certainly transformed me from a selfish character, although I still struggle on this area, to an intimate character, somebody who wants to be intimate and whole. Certainly led me to a lovely marriage and to have kids and to have family. And he's leading me on journeys. Sometimes I don't understand, because sometimes there's a lot of suffering involved. I'm not going to promise everything's going to be wonderful and everything's going to go away. But he will lead you. Are you open to them? It's a very confusing thing, and yet a very fulfilling thing. And actually something, when you realize it and when you find it, it's a very joyous and peaceful thing. Anyway, I'm going to go and preach on at you. And I'll just leave it like this, that I've spent a lot of time on ecumenics, and I don't think joining different churches together would be the key here. That's a bigger religious business with a more prominent and dominant discourse that will just crush people even more. Rather, I see the world in more local, smaller communities coming together, interacting with those structures. No, they don't have to be thrown out. They're not a big anathema. But be careful of Babylon. Be careful of Hellenization. Hey, we come to the end. Thanks for listening. I've put on here some details for ways that you can support me or support really the transcriptions of 180 interviews. I have 140 of the Messianic Jewish world, which is quite a spectrum of that phenomenon because it's a very confusing, complex phenomenon. And I have 40 interviews of the Muslim background believers or the Messianic Muslims. And I have basically each of the 5 main groups there, and I think the description would be more than insider, more than Muslim background believer, but would be really revealing. I think this data is really important that we process and understand it and learn from it, and it will be key for processes that are happening in the church, and in fact it's part of key processes happening in the church. But thank you very much. God bless you. Bye-bye.